Hello again, class. Today we're going to move on to delivery. So this, like I said before, this chapter kind of goes hand in hand with language. So once you've chosen the words that are going into your speech, now you need to decide how you're going to actually say those words, how you're going to deliver those words. So let's get into it. Now, I'm going to apologize right up front. I don't have necessarily an extremely dynamic voice, so there are going to be some parts of this that are going to be painful, but I will tell you they're going to hurt me more than they're going to hurt you. So let's go. So delivery, really what we're talking about is how you say something, and how you say something is as important as what you say. Now, I will maybe counter that a little bit and say how you say something is more important sometimes than what you say. Um, and if we could look back to recent political speeches and maybe see some examples there. Your delivery influences your credibility, the audience's interest, and whether they retain the information. So very, very important things in your speech. So credibility, interest, and retention. So really what we're talking about with delivery is your nonverbal communication. It's really the non-language, non-linguistic part of it. It's not the word part of it, but it's all the stuff that go around those words. So it's based on your voice, your use of voice and body. So different methods of delivery that we have. Some of you have already done it in class or have tried to do it in class. Others we don't necessarily do. So different types. You've got manuscript delivery, delivery from memory, impromptu delivery, and extemporaneous delivery. So let's look at these four types here. So a manuscript speech. This is a speech that's written out fully. It's read to the audience. It's used when precise wording is important. So think of, with this, think about things that are using teleprompters. So newscasters, maybe some politicians or celebrities. A lot of times a manuscript speech is done when someone's in trouble and they need to apologize for something, and everything they say can and will be used in court. So their lawyers write the speech and they read it from a list. So, but again, like newscasters and prepared speeches sometimes are like this with a teleprompter. Speaking from memory, maybe fully prepared, but they're delivered without the use of notes. So no note cards, no outlines, none of that stuff. They're delivered from memory. A lot of ceremonial speeches are delivered from memory because if you think about it, you could probably do a wedding toast or a eulogy from memory, and those are probably the most likely that you'll do from them, or an acceptance speech or something like that. So you don't necessarily use notes from these. Now, it could be something that you spend a lot of time preparing and then you memorize it, or it could be something that is done a little bit differently, almost like an impromptu, but you would still memorize key portions of it. Impromptu speaking, delivered with little or no immediate preparation. Some ceremonial speeches, so maybe you're not the best man or maid of honor at a wedding, but you're there and you'd like to say something and they kind of throw it out to the room. Does anyone else want to make a toast? Might be that, or eulogies sometimes are like that. Or sometimes you just get called on in class to do a speech or answer a question or respond to a prompt. So impromptu speaking is a type of speech. Now, one thing to understand with an impromptu speech, just because you're coming up with the final wording and the final structure there doesn't mean that you go in and wing it. If you know that there's an opportunity to do an impromptu speech, you want to at least mentally prepare, at least for a few minutes ahead of time. So if you're going to a wedding or a funeral, you know there might be an opportunity to speak. So think about what you might say. If you're in a class, you know if the teacher's going around the room asking questions, you kind of know what the teacher might ask. So prepare as much as you can in advance. This is also a competitive format for forensics, and in impromptu speaking, it's much more formal. You will get your topic. You'll get to choose between three topics. You'll have 2 minutes to prepare your speech, and then you will deliver a 5-minute speech. So the whole process takes 7 minutes. So if this sounds exciting to you, you probably want to get a hold of the director of forensics. That's me. And we can get you set up for that. Okay. Extemporaneous speech. Yeah, that's how you say that, extemporaneous. This is a carefully prepared and rehearsed speech presented from a brief set of notes. This is what we should do most of the time in class. Now, sometimes you're going to do a speech from memory. Um, I will say, at least in my classes, I never have you do a speech from a script, no manuscript speaking, but most of the time they're extemporaneous. So it should it should not sound rehearsed. It should sound um, like you're having a conversation with the audience each time, even though you have prepared a lot. So we'll see an example of extemporaneous speaking here. Now, she has note cards, but she's having a conversation with the audience, and that's the goal here. So let's listen to this.
Breathing has been an essential part of yoga for centuries. There are 4 major stages in the breathing process. The first is inhalation, the second, pause, the third, exhalation, and the fourth, a pause. It goes something like this. When you inhale, you feel the breath coming from deep within your belly. And as you pause, you will feel the breath rising up, and you focus just to feel the breath around your heart. And as you exhale, you feel the breath moving smoothly from your throat and out of your mouth. And as you pause the final time, it needs to be prolonged and deliberate, because this is what completes the cycle of yoga breathing until the new inhalation begins.
So you can hear when she's speaking, it's not just reading from the cards or reading from notes or reading from an outline. She knows the material. The cards are there just there to keep her on track. Okay, and I've mentioned conversational quality, and this is really what we want to try to attain when speaking extemporaneously or speaking in general. Because if we think about it, we don't like to be talked at, we'd like to be spoken we like to be spoken with, not spoken to. So conversational quality, it sounds spontaneous no matter how many times a speech has been rehearsed. And really you attain this by the use of your voice. So really what we're talking about, or the tools you have with your voice, have to do with the volume, the pitch, the rate, the pauses, the vocal variety, your pronunciation, and your articulation, as well as your dialect. So all of these things go together to give your voice that conversational tone. So let's go through each of these individually, and this is where it starts to get painful. Okay, the volume, the loudness or softness of the speaker's voice. So the loudness or softness of your voice, why does this matter? Well, if you're louder, that can get the audience's attention, but it can also turn them off. Or you can lower your voice down here. And with this, it causes the audience almost to lean in to listen to what you have to say. Either way, though, you need kind of a baseline there. So loudness or softness can say different things. The pitch, this is the highness or lowness of the speaker's voice. Now, again, I don't have a lot of range in my voice, but we could think about high pitch. So we could think about like Minnie Mouse or Minnie Driver, that really high pitch. So when we start to speak with a higher pitch, when we raise the pitch up here, a lot of times, yeah, it starts to build excitement because we're excited. When we get excited, the pitch goes up. Or if we're serious and we want to show some gravitas and some importance to it, we can lower the voice. So if we lower the voice down here, so we could start to think about people who speak in that low tone. Think about Darth Vader or Mufasa. So James Earl Jones, that really low booming voice, that low voice adds that seriousness and that importance to it. So that can deliver a different message to your audience than if it's really high pitched. The speech rate, and this goes with the previous two, the rate, the speed at which the person speaks. So again, when we're excited, we tend to raise the pitch, but we also tend to speak faster and get louder. So if we get really excited about something, the volume goes up, the rate gets faster, and the pitch goes up. But when we're really trying to be serious about something, let me tell you something that's really, really important. We tend to lower the volume, we lower the pitch, we lower the rate. We get low and slow with this. And it lets the audience know, hey, this is important. I need to pay attention to this. As opposed to, wow, this is really exciting. Then pauses, and pauses can be problematic. And pauses are one of the things that makes an essay very different from a speech. Pauses are a momentary break in vocal delivery. Silent pauses are used for things like punctuation, breathing, emphasis, those type of things. Because if we think about it, when you write an essay, you use punctuation to show mental pauses for your audience, right? A comma is a short pause, a period is a longer pause, a paragraph break is an even longer pause. So we need to put those in because they can't actually visually see what's on the paper. So we put those punctuations in there. We also need to build in pauses for breathing because when someone's reading an essay, they can read and breathe at the same time, and they two things aren't necessarily interrelated, but in a speech they are. Otherwise, when you start to read or start to go through your speech, if you don't build in pauses for breathing, you start to run out of breath. And yeah, so you need to plan for that. And you put pauses in sometimes to emphasize certain parts of the speech to make sure your audience really understands it, like that. The other type of pauses that we have are vocalized pauses, and these are things that obviously you don't have in an essay and you do have in speeches. And vocalized pauses occur when a speaker says or like and whatnot, whatever, those type of things. Those are just filler words. They don't have any meaning, and we use them when we're coming up with the final wording for our speech. So the more you get off of your notes, the more likely you are to have vocalized pauses. The more you are on your notes where you're just reading from a sheet, the less likely that you're going to have these. Now, throwing in an and an isn't a death blow to your speech. You can have them in there. It's not a big deal. People incorporate those into their everyday conversations all the time. It's when they become owners, so they take over your speech. And I've seen some speeches where people will come up and the first word that they say is so they get up to the front of the class. Like I want to like do like my speech on like this really like important topic and whatnot. So yeah, you talk for like 10 seconds, you haven't said anything. So yeah, that's fine if they're in there. Try to avoid them or try to minimize them. Vocal variety, this is putting all of those things together. This is the changes in the rate, the pitch, the volume. It's how you incorporate the pauses into your speech. It's what gives your voice that expressiveness. It's what allows your audience to engage with what you're saying rather than just letting it drone in one ear and out the other. Pronunciation, this is something, again, we don't really deal with in an essay. It's the accepted standard of a sound and rhythm for words in a given language. And this is where sometimes when you do your research and you see words written on paper, but you never actually hear them spoken out loud, sometimes you need to go to the dictionary or dictionary.com, click on the little speaker and hear how it's supposed to be pronounced. Now, if you don't know how to pronounce a word and you get to your speech and you realize, wow, I'm not really sure how to pronounce that word the way you think it should be pronounced and then stick to that pronunciation. Articulation is a little bit different. Articulation is the physical production of speech sounds, and this is something that will suffer when you get nervous and you're reading from a paper. Because when you get nervous and you read from a paper, you start to run really fast through your speech and you don't really articulate every single word and they start to run together. Yeah, slow down. You need to articulate. It's actually saying the words that you are supposed to say so the audience can actually understand the words that you want them to understand. Dialect is a little bit different. Dialect is the variety of a language distinguished by accent, grammar, vocabulary, these type of things. So this is when we think about regional dialects. So we think of Southern dialects or East Coast dialects. And yeah, in Southern California, we also have particular dialects. So think about how we give directions. That's unique to us, right? You take the 10 freeway to the 215. Yeah. Or you take the 60 to the 91. Yeah, other people don't give directions like that from out of the area. But dialect is kind of how you say things. And how you pronounce words. Okay, then we get to the speaker's body. So all of that had to do with how you said the words. Now we get to the body. This is your personal appearance. This is how you move when you're delivering your speech. These are the gestures that you use. This is the eye contact that you have when you're giving a speech. And all of this is important. So be aware of it. Now, your teacher may or may not have you dress up for a speech, but you need to know that if you're delivering a speech, the audience is going to be paying attention to all of this stuff. Okay, So let's look at some examples of gestures here. So using facial expressions. So see how she uses the facial expressions to reinforce the words that she says and the message she's trying to deliver with this speech.
Now you know the need for Special Olympics volunteers. So the question is, what can you do to help? The answer is, become a volunteer. The most obvious way to become a volunteer is to become a coach. Now, you don't have to be a great athlete. You don't have to have any prior coaching experience. Special Olympics offers a general course on the principles of coaching in addition to a mentoring program in which the new coaches receive guidance from the experienced coaches. And if you don't want to be a coach, there's other ways to help out as well. You can work behind the scenes by assisting in fundraising or organizing events or any of the other countless details involved in running a huge organization such as Special Olympics. It's also very important that you know that your contribution to Special Olympics can last from a day to a year to a lifetime, depending on the level of commitment that you're ready to make.
Now she's smiling this entire time. Now it works for this speech because it's a speech about the Special Olympics. Now you don't want to be smiling the whole time. Today I'm going to talk to you about different death rituals around the world and how people deal with their loved ones kicking the bucket. No, don't do that. If you're going to do that, today I'm going to talk about death rituals around, right? It needs to match what you're talking about. Okay, kinesics, the study of body motion as a mode of communication, and this kind of comes out of the theater tradition of public speaking. So it's how you gesture with your hands, where you stand on the stage, all of that matters. And the book will talk about some specifics with this. Okay, practicing your delivery. And yes, you should be practicing your delivery. Insert dramatic pause here to show importance. Yeah, see, it works. This is you going through the preparation outline out loud. So your preparation outline, as we found out, is your plan for the speech. Go through it out loud, prepare your speaking outline, and then practice your speech out loud from your speaking outline. If you are doing the speech from memory, you need to add that step of going through your speech from memory, but you need to go through your speech not once, not twice, a dozen times, 24 times. You need to go through your speech a lot until you are comfortable with it. Now, I would recommend once you start a pass through on your speech, keep going. If you make a mistake, push through it and keep going. If you make a mistake and start over, what will happen is, yeah, I practiced my speech 50 times. Yeah, you practiced the introduction 50 times and you practiced the conclusion 3 times. So once you start it, go through. If you make a mistake, keep going. Polish and refine your delivery. And sometimes this is where you figure out that that speech that you wrote doesn't work when you say it. So choose the words that you can actually pronounce and then give it a dress rehearsal. Practice with people, draw your friends and family together and practice your speech in front of them. And we've talked about this before. Now, sometimes you'll have a question and answer session with your speech. So if you think about it, if you're going to deliver an informative speech at work, sometimes your colleagues are going to want to ask some questions. In academia, if you prepare a paper, sometimes there's a question and answer at the end. So formulate answers to possible questions. As you're preparing your speech, you know what you cover in your speech and what you don't cover. You know where people are likely to have questions. So have answers to those questions. Practice the delivery of those answers. When you're actually in the moment, managing them, approach questions with a positive attitude. Here's the deal. If someone's asking a question, it's probably because they cared at least a little bit about your speech. So it's good that they ask a question. Listen carefully to the question, so you answer the question that they're asking, and then direct the answers to the entire audience. It's a good idea if someone asks a question, repeat the question so the entire audience can get the question. That also gives you time to formulate an answer and then answer to the entire audience. Be honest and straightforward. Sometimes you don't have an answer. You know what? That was outside the scope of my research. Or, you know what, I don't have an answer for you, but leave me some contact information. I'll look that up and I'll get back to you. Stay on track. Especially in the workplace, I've seen this happen a lot where people try to get you off track because, well, for a lot of different reasons. But if it doesn't really relate to the speech that you did, just let them know. You know what? That kind of doesn't relate to what we're talking about here. It's a great question, though. We can address it afterwards.